Well, hello, everybody. Dr. Russo here. Going to be moving some stuff around before we get going live. Get going live on several different platforms. There we go. Yeah. Well, today, I kind of want to talk about several things, if you will. Let's do some other things here as well. Um, and got you from all different angles here now, right? So trying to keep it cozy in a way, kind of relaxed as well. Um, the last week has been interesting. I had recently opened up a Reddit of all things account, so had that going for me. But in doing the Reddit account, boy, I got attacked. All on critical thinking, in that I use every tool at my that I can. If I can use a tool that's going to help me, if I can use a tool that's going to help me, I will use it to the best of my abilities. So this week I've kind of used, I've been using artificial intelligence to help me with my research, my writing, my editing. And, if you're not using these tools, then what are you going to learn? I learned quite a bit, and the attacks that I've seen on me have been interesting because, and I'm not defending myself. I know who I am. Um, I know what knowledge I have. I know the ideas, the thoughts, and the perspectives. I am going to be. Oh, let's see. There we go. Okay. The thoughts, ideas, and perspectives that I provide to the world, and in doing so, I'm comfortable. I'm very comfortable with all that, and the funny thing is I have so many, I would say, haters out there. Yeah, there we go. So many people that have issues with being educated. They don't want somebody to provide. They just, and if they don't want to listen to the substance of this, then they have to attack. They feel, rather than just going, you know what? Because all I'm trying to do is get people to think smarter, to think deeper. I have, my own platforms, and it's not about getting clicks. You think about what, getting a little warm too. Yep, bourbon does make it better. You think about that. You're trying to impart knowledge, education on individuals, and I think that's one of the hard parts of our society these days. Is we no longer have the civility, the respect for one another to really talk to one another as well, to hear ideas, thoughts, perspectives, if you will. Um, and what else is there to learn? And so looking at it, I am an avid reader. I started on School, Skool. I had recently started only like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, an academy, a critical thinking academy, and trying to get a critical thinking academy going. Um, the first course is really an introduction of how do we get ourselves thinking. And David Moore, he passed away last year, was a military intelligence officer. He wrote several books under the what is now National Intelligence University. It was the Defense Intelligence College decades ago, but he wrote a book called Sense Making. And in this book, it was critical thinking for analysts. Now, there's the Bibles for intelligence analysts that we hold dear as kind of what we look at as references. And one of he kind of coined the phrase "thinking about thinking while thinking." What does that really translate to? It's when we have arguments, when we have debates, discussions, issues with something, are we listening to ourselves and are we taking into account the premise in which we are putting together the discussion? What are we looking at as far as, you have the premise of the argument is this issue. And then we get into the more or less the arguments of, here's A, B, and C, because if those premises are therefore true, then here's the conclusion. But does that mean that if the premise is not true, does that mean that the conclusion will be true? You have to think about when we say, we come up with arguments, and I'm talking about real arguments. You can take today, where we talk about anti-ICE and is ICE overstepping their bounds, and what are the political ramifications of ICE doing its job. And you hear the arguments. Some of the arguments that start right off are really, they're non-destructive arguments. They don't mean anything. It's emotionally based. When we start saying, you have the thoughts, that's great. Thoughts, ideas, and perspectives are really based in facts. What are the facts? What are the truths? And that's, you have to take some of that into account. Somebody's truth, is that somebody else's reality? Those are part of the critical thinking aspects, because you're not going to win when you are talking to somebody whose truths and facts are not based in a normative reality. Tons of books. I mean, I've got my bookshelf over here that when you look, and I've got tons of books on critical thinking. I myself have written books, several books on critical thinking, and I will do my plug, but I wasn't, like I said, this is just kind of an ad hoc, where are we at today? So the first book I wrote was Precision and Perspectives. See, there you go. And then my second one is Safeguarding Analytical Integrity. I do go over, in this book, quite a bit of the scandals that have happened with the CIA, ODNI, FBI, not only recently, but historically. So I kind of, whereas we can say, is this a basis of political issues? Well, it transcends political ideology. It goes well beyond just the two-party system. It shows that it happens to both parties. They're both guilty of creating issues within, and we have definitely seen it myself within both the agency, the bureau, analysts. And this is where I do have my premise of analysts think they're smart. I'm humble enough to know I don't know everything. Um, is it easy for me to Monday morning quarterback? Yeah, it's easy for everybody. But knowing and reading what I know now or what I see now, academically, as a scholar, as a professor, at several institutions, and talking to colleagues and talking to others, intelligence analysts, and teaching them, I come to the conclusion analysts really don't know how to think critically. We think we are. We think we go in and we're the smartest people in the room. We're not. We're really not. Because I can ask questions. I also, some people think that they're intellectuals, and they're not. They are not intellectuals. Why? It's not that intellectuals just read. I would say, yes, I'm a practicing intellectual. Okay. It's not a religion, but practicing intellectualism is something that we do on a daily basis. If we're not doing it on a daily basis, how are we supposed to, yes, get smarter? It's to make better decisions, to make better judgments. How many times do we in a day say, oh, wish I would have thought that through. Okay, I'll do better tomorrow. Oh, I didn't do this. I didn't do that. I could have been more organized. I could have saw through that conversation. I let this get to me. I got angry. I got upset. I hate the news. It's the politics. It's the people. You're letting all of this get to you. But how do we really and truly practice ourselves? This is, yes, taking in philosophy and the classics and just reading self-development. How many people read self-development books? Do any of you read self-development books? Things that, as long as it's making you better, as long as it's making you think about something new that you haven't thought of before, that you haven't really practiced, it has to become habit. If we start to think about the way we approach problems, we can go into the psychology of, okay, well, I'm not going to let somebody push my buttons. I know what makes me upset and I know what triggers me. But that still doesn't stop me from getting upset. I do. I still get upset. I let things get to me, but I got to teach myself not to let things get to me. So, I started off years ago. I read, and this was back in the 1940s, was The Intellectual Life. If you've never heard of it, it's a great read. It's a little difficult because the original author was French, and this is translated from French into English. It does talk about, the spirit and the conditions and the methods in which we live our life. And so, yes, there is the spirit. There's a bit of religion, and it doesn't necessarily always have to be thought of as Christianity, but he does talk about Christianity, about living kind of that wholesome life. Well, we have to have ethics. We have to live by a code. That helps. And then I kind of graduated onto, again, the original works done by As a Man Thinketh, by James Allen. Really a good book. Kind of hard to get through, just like I said, the Intellectual Life, although the original author of As a Man Thinketh is an Englishman, but it's kind of the older English, right? So I did find recently, and this was published a couple of years ago, As a Man Thinketh. It's an updated version. I found it, of all places, at a Barnes and Noble. And it's written really well, kind of translated more up to date so we can understand it. It's definitely an easier read. But as you read it, it kind of says, here's how you should think. Here's how you should interact with people. Here's how we hold a conversation or don't hold a conversation. I love my cigars, and I really look forward to. I look, Grace. Um, I really look forward to having my cigars in the contemplation time. That's part of having cigars, is sitting, relaxing. Yes, there is the conversational ability if you go to a high-end lounge, to meet people and have that higher end. Almost you feel like sometimes, and you, for new cigar people, they always say, "Oh, I don't go to cigar lounge. I always feel like those people are snobby." Well, no, we're sitting because we have the time to just relax, and we want to have these slower conversations. They don't have to be heated conversations. They can be very slow. They can be methodical. We can exchange ideas. Remember, an argument is based on ignorance. An argument is just somebody wants to argue, somebody wants to make their point, and there doesn't have to be any facts to it. They don't have to demonstrate any active thought in construction of, here's my evidence. Here's the evidence for and against, because you have to be thinking in that realm as well. But then you look at it from the aspect of, where are my weak points? Where am I going to be open to somebody saying yes or no to a point? A lot of these books will teach you that. And in my precision and perspective, I really do talk about overcoming our own cognitive biases. Our own cognitive biases are those things that we cherry pick only in support of our own argument. We feel uncomfortable if we start to lose an argument. I have no problem with that. I'm not here to persuade somebody. Even within, say, my own lectures, as well as being online here with you, okay, I look at it from the perspective of, I can impart the information I know about and let you do with it what you want, right? Philosophy is a significant aspect of critical thinking. You think the greats of Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, they viewed the world and tried to give us answers of what the world is and how it works from their viewpoint. Not that they were trying to give all the answers, but they gave us new perspectives of how to look at the world. They viewed the world differently as well. So when we start to really go, okay, well, then we start to bring in that ethics. And ethics were always a big part. And then you look at the Cynics and the Stoics, two very different schools of thought. Cynics were always just that. Where do we get that you're cynical? You get that from the Cynics, who had to debate against everything. The Stoics looked at and viewed the world in a more positive light to, how do we challenge the world that we have to live in every day. Marcus Aurelius was one of those who we have the greatest, his notes, because he wrote in his own diaries about life and how his own mentor had told him all these things, and that he started to put them into works. And that's why he started his diary. Meditations is what he called it, because he woke up every day with those thoughts. And if you look at meditations, if you look at quotes by everything from Marcus Aurelius and Cicero, Epictetus, Seneca, they are about facing challenges, whether they're emotional, they are physical, they're educational. These are things that we have to look at from a different light. And we do, right? The Foundation for Critical Thinking is awesome. They're getting ready actually later this mid-year to have their next open conference, online conference, which is awesome. But Richard Paul passed away a long time ago. Linda Elder continues to run the Foundation for Critical Thinking. They have a lot of certification, education, and training. But their book, yes, you can see how I tab lots and lots of my books. Because I use these as research. That's again going back to the beginning. I was accused of, well, you use AI. Well, yeah, but I have to have the knowledge to find out what I need to put together what I want to research, and then I research it. And yes, I use AI. AI is that significant tool. I can say that it has significantly helped me learn more and more about what I don't know. And I think that's where you should as well. And then I started to listen to other authors and presenters and speakers and teachers about critical thinking and their viewpoints. And I absolutely love it. Because one of the other ones is Robert Fisher. And this is not just a book review. It's just, I'm showing you and trying to tell you all these different readings that go into how I make up my mind and how, yes, technology wise, we should be attaching as students, as educators, as civilian, daily lives. What should we be doing to take all of this and use it to our advantage? Now, teaching thinking, this was an eye opener, and it really more or less was really about the philosophical aspects that we don't teach our children, and we should, starting like in the second grade. What happened to teaching philosophy? Philosophy teaches us how to question, not just face challenges, not just look at viewpoints of the world, but how to question reasonably. You hear reasoning, and a lot of the buzzwords that we hear: reasoning, metacognition, right? And then ethics and thought. Well, critical thinking is that overarching, what we would say is the overarching way that we should be thinking about information, right? Taking in information, processing it. And if you're not processing it, because, well, you have people to include, let's go back to what Robert Fisher was talking about in trying to teach children. They haven't seen the world. You're talking about a 7-year-old in second grade. Have they seen the world? How do they view the world, though? With a lot of innocence. They're taught, they're a sponge. And if we're not teaching them how to question the whys or the hows in life, then what are we doing? We've lost that ability to even reason with one another. It becomes a screaming match between two people. It's unfortunate that it becomes that screaming match, because that means no one's listening. Part of critical thinking is being able to really sit back psychologically and listen to somebody try to prove their point. Their point may be totally aimless, and it's going to expose it for what it is. So when we start really thinking on how somebody is approaching us and they want to get in on, say, a conversation, is it best to just let them write it out? Yes. A lot of times, and that's where it is, there's the adage of that the stronger man is more silent. And I believe that. Because the people who are more vocal, they want to be heard. They have to persuade people. And that's one thing that I'm not necessarily saying that here, I'm standing here. Yeah, I'm trying to persuade you to think better, to think harder, to think deeper. I've created, yes, I teach online courses, for my own. I teach at universities. My Substack, if you're not familiar with my Substack, I say go on there, look at what I love writing. And in the last couple of years, I really wanted to write more and more deeply. And so when I look at my own writings and my posts, I think I'm up to like 107 right now. It's all about critical thinking. And I try to impart lessons, recommendations, implications. I try to give analysts, anybody in here, intelligence analysts, crime analysts. And if you are, well, I highly recommend, like, I'm not the end all be all, and I'll never profess to be. But I think having the intellectual humility to know that we don't know how to think and to think better. And here we're facing, and everybody hears it, we're facing this oblivion, we'll say it that way, oblivion by AI. And that's what I find still kind of funny today, is that somebody who did need to feel the need to attack me on using. I said, well, it's a writing tool just like Microsoft Word, and I could use Grammarly, and a lot of times I dictate exactly what I want it to say, but it cleans it up. Because if you hear me talking, and I can go back through my recording, I'll hear ums, ahs, I'll hear other language graffiti, if you will. But people are dumb. But rather than attack the problem of, hey, okay, so you used AI to help you in your research and your writing, was it idea generation? Well, yes, but I start off, just like I said before, I'm an insatiable reader. I have a whole library, and I read every day. I read every night, and I bookmark. I just don't read page to page to page expecting to learn. No, I bookmark the ideas and go, my gosh, I got to go look at more of that so I can look at the epistemic ideology and humility of metacognition. Well, what does that mean? Well, I've got to study more about the way that I think and the way that I process information from somebody else. Because if I'm not taking in information and I'm not processing it, what it means to me and what I should be getting out of it, well, then I'm kind of failing myself in that intellectual humility. Because then I'm professing to know everything, and I don't need to do any more research. AI has actually surpassed human thought. Elon Musk even talked about that in an interview at Davos, a week ago. You look at all the research out there that talks about where AI is at. It is leaps and bounds every single day. It will get to the point. Now, he said it surpassed human knowledge. That means it's been able to suck up everything. And yeah, you can, that's why it no longer hallucinates as much. That's why it no longer has the sycophancy, right? The hallucinations are the wrong information. No, it does not do the analysis for you yet, but it's getting close. When it is able to do the analysis, that give us that so what for, that main idea of what you're trying to get to as solving the problem. When it's able to solve the problem, like solving cancer, solving illnesses, solving economic issues, when it's able to tell you, here's the problem, here's the purpose, the argument, the thesis, here's the questions that need to be answered, here's all the data to show you in the end, here's the solution, you'll no longer have a need for a PhD. My PhD paper it will be then worthless. Why? Because I no longer need it to go do my own research. Yes, I can plug in and ask it a question, and it has to be, what type of information am I plugging in to my AI, whether it's Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, Grok, DeepSeek. I do what's called vibing. Vibing is I will go into and use Gemini in my Google. I'll use Claude. I will use Copilot and ask them the same questions to ensure that are the informations that are coming back to me stackable, meaning they're all like the same without being redundant. Okay. It's like asking 5 PhDs the same question. And if they've all done their research and they are experts in their field, you're going to get a lot of agreement, but then you're going to get some diversity in that thought because there are lived experiences, and AI can do that. That's a sycophancy. The API in the middle is its original code. It's been building on that original code. We do very little of the reflective thinking these days, right? How are we supposed to solve, especially as intelligence analysts, how are we supposed to solve national security and homeland security questions? You take it right now. You take the ideas from the left and from the right of how do we solve the mass illegal immigration crisis that has, yes, a focus of crime. And how do we effectively deal with both? Well, law enforcement is one, right? There's a whole reason that we have ICE. Their whole mandate is about immigration, customs enforcement. I mean, that's end all be all. That is in what, US Code 52, right? You can argue that, well, we don't need ICE. Well, your real argument is that you just don't, either one, like law enforcement, you're anti-law enforcement. You got to look at the argument, or that you are really pro criminal, because again, the person that came here not through the legal means is breaking the law. That when you and I, just like we get caught speeding and we get a ticket, we're accused of breaking a law, the speed limit, right? So the argument can then be, well, is it really against that you do want these people in your community? But what about the ones who are criminals beyond just being here illegal, who may have overstayed their original visas? If they did come here legally, they overstayed a, visitor visa, tourist visa. Well, then they start breaking other laws, because are they actually paying taxes? Well, if they're not, then now they're breaking even social contract, Rousseau's the social contract, that we should be able to live without fear of somebody stealing something from our car, our garage, hurting us, right? That at what point is the argument not about ICE itself, but is it that, okay, that you support the illegal immigration and the criminal just because what? We can have this conversation, and it's a great conversation. I always love hearing all about it. You're hearing what my point of view is. I can go find the receipts that would support my premise. And then here it is, I'm asking for somebody else's premise. Are they able to? What about when we have decision fatigue and the impact on critical thinking? Especially intelligence analysts have this issue all the time. They have to make decisions every day about pieces of information. Where can AI help with all of that? That when you have extended periods of time that you have to continue to make more and more choices, well, there becomes a deterioration in that thinking. because then there's times that we solved this problem yesterday. I heard about it yesterday. And well, okay, did you? And did you do anything about it? Are you sure that it is um, the same problem? I would argue that no two problems are the same. We start to have this fatigue, and it shifts into cognition, away from that deliberative analysis. We're no longer the faster thinkers that we think we are. The esoteric responding thereby increases the susceptibility to bias, confirmation bias, and such inconsistencies, and then also the omission of errors that we don't want to be responsible for. That, oh, well, this one bit of information just doesn't jive with what we're trying to say. So that's why a lot of the writings that I do, I use AI to help me in this. Normally, to write 100 articles, I think any scholar, and some of these are only 1 or 2 pages long, some are 3 and 4, okay, to even write a book, is that I had to compile information. What better way? And when the internet came out in the 1990s, it was a great way to start talking to people and breaking down the international walls. And we were finally able on AOL to talk to somebody from a different country and ask questions. Now, being in the military at the time and doing intelligence work in the 1990s, it was really almost forbidden to do that. No, don't get on AOL and start looking for people from the former Soviet Union and asking them, because they could be looking to collect on you. So we didn't do it. But by the time the internet, and then you started talking about all these different platforms, MySpace came out, Facebook, then you end up with these platforms that we're all on, everything from TikTok to Instagram and gosh, even YouTube live streaming. It now breaks down the walls, and I can hear from people from all different walks of life, to include talking about intelligence analysis and how maybe the Italians or the Greeks or the English or the French, the Italians, how are you all thinking about? And I learned from a colleague that, well, right now, like the Italians with their intelligence, they want to look at it more from the philosophical aspect. And I love it, because I love the ability to look at things from the philosophical aspect. The philosophy of right. And I'm not talking about the philosophy of right-wing politics. I'm talking about being right. There's, other books out there that you can start to look at from, yes, the intelligence standpoint. Locke Johnson, Mark Lowenthal, Robert Clark. I can't remember. Amy Zygert, Abizade, as well. Christy Abizade, all great and brilliant intelligence people. And it's great to always hear from them and have them speak and hear their thoughts. And of course, they are scholars and academics, and they are visionaries of intelligence. But you never hear the same thing from each and every one of them. They have different aspects. Same thing when it comes to looking at intelligence analysis books. This is one of the ones I was talking about earlier, about from David Moore, Critical Thinking and Intelligence Analysis. You have David Hewer's, you have Hewer and the psychology of intelligence analysis. Hey, Mike, good to see you. That you can actually go to CIA's website. They have the Center for Intelligence Studies, and there are a lot of downloadables. They have journals that are nothing about intelligence analysis and standards and writing and thinking and Yes, you can then go into the foreign policy and having to understand how to think about problems. See, there is also the problem of, and I go back to the decision fatigue. When people are experts on a specific topic and that's all they study for their career, that's where you start having to worry about the deterioration. Because and that's where I get to in my second book, Safeguarding Analytical Integrity, is that we, as a political system in this country that is so divided, it did sweep into our law enforcement and other intelligence agencies, departments, and community partners. Then our society, our individuals who are intelligence analysts have their own frame of mind. And so therefore, anything they talk about comes from that point of view. And we're supposed to be using these structured analytical techniques, which are great, but we only have to say we used them. Well, I used brainstorming, I used ACH, I used devil's advocacy. But yeah, but did that actually change anything? And then we say, well, I sent that document, that product, it was written, I sent it to another agency, another analyst came back with their notes and they agreed. Okay, well, I want to ask that question. Do you always send your stuff to that other analyst? I've heard this time and again. Yeah, it's low friction. Yeah, they get to my stuff all the time. Well, all of a sudden you've got somebody who may actually have your same point of view. And so the cognitive bias is there. It's there and it's not going away, right? So when we start to really look at having applications that are developed specifically for intelligence analysts, education, executive leadership, we have to be able to start illustrating some measurable improvements within institutions. And I talk about like the academies for the FBI and CIA and DIA and NSA, the ODNI, these education institutions that have intelligence crime analyst degrees, not just certificates, but degrees. That are we teaching more than historics? Are we teaching more than pattern analysis and how to do a matrices that is in a temporal analysis or link analysis? Are we actually teaching the new analyst or even the old analysts that, wait, the tradecraft that goes into this is that we need to have this. Yeah, we can use analytical structured techniques, but we have to have some cognitive guardrails. We have to be able to operationalize our metacognition, making reasoning inspectable. Yes, templates, prompts, rubrics, exercises that are not just a check in the box, but that actually get individuals to think. I penned an article, and I'm going to go to it on my Substack. I penned an article about our not only keeping students, but losing thinkers, where I just don't think that higher learning institutions are, that higher learning institutions are really looking at keeping students happy rather than saying that professor is teaching you critical thinking within, say, criminology. And when we start teaching about the schools of thought like routine activities theory, broken windows, and the like, that student at the end is going to come away with the ability to sound off to somebody the differences and the comparisons of the myriad of theoretical frameworks that explain the reasons that we have crime. or how we're going to deter crime, or how we're going to prevent, mitigate, just stamp out crime. But then there's the malpractice that also comes to light. And that is that analyst. I was just talking with a colleague analyst last week. It's Saturday, right? And we were talking about the misinformation, disinformation campaign of what's been going on in Minneapolis, and about what the left and Antifa has been doing, and getting involved, and that these are paid agitators, and they're no longer protesters. These are paid agitators. There are the receipts. But then I said, well, wait, what do you mean? What is the misinformation and what is the disinformation as buzzwords? And then you bring in propaganda. And this is a colleague with 15, 20 years, almost 20 years of intelligence experience, analysis, and having done counterterrorism. And they were not able to tell me the general definition in intelligence of what misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda are. Why? Should that not be, and I'm not here to say, well, this is what misinformation, disinformation are. I know what it is, but I'm here to ask you. If you cannot, in your mind right now, be able to tell out loud in 5 seconds what misinformation is, what disinformation and propaganda are, their meaning within, when if you were to pen an intelligence article, guess what? That's a travesty. That's a travesty. We're supposed to be the professionals, the practitioners of an art of intelligence, and we're not. Right? We're not. That's really kind of scary if you think about it these days, that we are not that smart. I did this. I didn't actually pen an article. It was on my LinkedIn, is what I think I put it in. Let me see if I can get to it. Yeah, this is the one that actually earned me on Reddit. I did post it on Reddit, and I posted on my LinkedIn. And I really want people to go to my LinkedIn. I love interacting. I love collaboration. I want more people to invite me to speak publicly. I'm going to several conferences. IAFI conference I'm doing in Georgia this year for the U.S. And I just put in my proposal for the European chapter. So one's going to be held in September in London. And my premise is that intelligence analysts, stop pretending critical thinking means I read a lot. I write a lot of products. I sift through tons of information and I know stuff. Okay, but does that actually make you an intelligence analyst? Does it make you that smartest person in the room? Yes. Throughout a 30-year career, I joked with many of them saying, we're type A personalities. We all have egos. We all think we're the best. But then we start to have to critique one another's work. And we kind of figure out who's good, who's bad, who gets, hey, you're right. I'm humble enough to say, oh, yeah, that was, I didn't think about that. Because you're giving the ability to other people to have that critique of thought that maybe yours was incomplete. And again, the critical thinking aspect is we're under so much pressure in the intelligence community to write. And it's because if we don't write stuff today, it's perishable. Intelligence is perishable. It doesn't become actionable. It's not answering the intelligence requirements, the commander intelligence priorities fast enough for them to do anything operationally. It's different when you're on the strategic side of the house, but not everything could be strategic either. It's not fast acting. But what happens when it gets down to the operational and the tactical stuff that has to be done right now? So that's why I say most analysts don't actually think critically in the conceptual sense. They summarize what they see. I know it. I'm calling it out. Why aren't you? Why are we resting on our laurels? We have companies that do risk management, risk assessment, and they hire these intelligence officers, these intelligence analysts with advanced degrees, or even that, hey, this is Admiral so and so, this is Colonel so and so, this is General so and so, and they're going to lead. But I'm sorry to say, those are not intelligence analysts. They're good decision makers, but they're only good decision makers based on the analysis. So therefore, to me, you're just a decision maker. You didn't do anything really that outstanding or significant, especially the analysts. We default to institutional narratives. That is where, even in my second book, we fall into, and that's what we've done within the CIA, within the FBI, within other intelligence organizations, even including law enforcement organizations at the federal, state. You'll hear that all the time. That just became the narrative of that institution. I want to rock that boat. Prove me wrong. You can do onesies and twos. Don't get me wrong. I know you can do ones and twos. But I think as a whole, so there's that confidence that gets really confused with the rigor. We don't look at the rigor. Words have consequences. We have to always constantly go, why? Why is it called analysis? So if you really want to prove you can actually think, just don't produce words. Answer these, what I say is these 4 questions without Googling, right? Without hiding anything, right? So when you make an analytical judgment, let's see if you can answer these. When you make an analytical judgment, what would have to be true for your conclusion to be wrong? Remember, there's with argumentation, according to Francis Wantabi Dower in his book from 1994, Introduction to Critical Thinking, he breaks a lot of it down. Critical thinking for arguments, he breaks down into mathematical equations. And this, where if you say, well, I don't like statistics, well, or I don't like math, well, you should, because statistical analysis is hard to argue with, but it can be argued with once you start to see, well, what questions were asked. Okay. So you make the analytical judgment. What would be true for your conclusion to be wrong? What evidence specifically would force you to update or abandon it? Here's question number 1. What is the strongest alternative explanation to your current assessment of an issue? And what observable indicators would discriminate between your preferred hypothesis and that alternative? Again, I ask you, it's not an easy question. If you pit that against what you have just said, here's my assessment of a problem, a situation, a circumstance, an event, apply that question. Now, once you've answered that, then you say, identify one assumption that you're treating as, say, a background fact. Something that it just, now you're having to justify it. Okay. What is its evidentiary basis? What's its failure mode? And what happens to your judgment if it collapses? So you have to ask these questions, because once you start to have the answers, and it's not cookie cutter, that's what I'm saying. We need to get away from is the cookie cutter analysis that I see a lot of students do. We have students in courses like counterterrorism courses pick apart terrorist events, like the Boston bombing. Yet they just regurgitate what is already out there. But I say, okay, did you ask these type of questions? And I don't see that they are. And then now you have to separate evidence from interpretation. Name 2 facts you're relying on, then show how 2 different reasonable analysts can interpret the same facts into opposing judgments and explain why yours is more valid. I want you to be thinking about that. So those are really your 4 questions, right? When you make an analytic judgment, what would have you be true of your conclusion to be wrong? What evidence, so on. The next one is, what is the strongest alternative explanation question? And if you want, you can always hit me up on email, charlesmrusso@hotmail.com. You can even leave a comment. I'll go through comments periodically. If you want these questions, you just let me know. And then it goes down to, the identify one assumption you're treating as background fact, and then separate evidence from interpretation. I'm going to end it there for today. I really appreciate everyone's, you're coming in, you're listening to me kind of go on. I invite you to, hit my Substack up, listen to my TikToks. I also have my school courses, the Analytical Edge in School, SKOOL.com. You can look for Analytical Edge Academy. I just released my second course. The initial course is the Introduction to Critical Thinking. And then I went on to how to become an intellectual, going through what it really means and how to build that up. I know it sounds almost kind of cliche. People say, well, what you're trying to teach people. Yeah, I think that we can teach ourselves, but we also need help, and I'm here to help. I will have 2 other courses coming out, one about intelligence, fusing intelligence and philosophy to make better analysis, and then AI and cognitive, metacognitive and cognitive thinking. So if you are interested in those, please let me know by, of course, going there and becoming a member of school. Of my school. So with that, thank you very much for everybody, and you all take care. Have a great rest of your day.